Hello there, this is Hans Forschner with Navcan Engineering. Thank you for your interest in the SoundPLAN Graphics. In this video I would like to go over one example map in the SoundPLAN Wind City project. The Wind City project is provided by SoundPLAN. The project is installed as part of the demo project, or you can download the project from the update and download options. In this video you learn about the fundamental steps of creating maps, the hierarchy of parent and child elements, the setup, the control objects, the elements, and more. Before I get started, I want to note that the graphic created in the 01 grid noise map sheet requires the road noise module, the grid noise map module, and the cartography modules. First of all, let me kind of get started here, and I want to start from fresh. So right now I'm in the View Sheet Manager. So here we can see all the existing maps that are in this project, or in this Wind City project. And I want to reload this map that is currently showing. So I'm just dragging it here in the center. I'll click no. So whatever changes I implemented, they will be reversed. So I'll click no. And it reloads the entirety of this project, of this grid noise map sheet. So first of all, what I want to show is kind of the how this is assembled. So to do that, I go to File and I go down to Sheet Components. So here's Sheet Components, or with F6. We can also highlight that, F6. We can also just jump into the Sheet Components. And here we see the hierarchy of the different elements that we have on this sheet. So we start at the very top. There's a map, there's a legend, and then there's several maps here, map A, B, C, D, E, and F. So there's a total of 6 maps. There's a legend here. And as you can kind of see, this has a clear hierarchy, so each of the maps. And you can close and open the different parent elements, and then what is underlying under these elements. So for example, under the legend, we have a color scale that is applied to all the maps A through F. Then there's a description and the company logo. So let's take a look at that. So I highlight the legend, and then here on the right hand side you can kind of see what is highlighted. So here, this is the legend box. This is all what's on the right hand side, and we have multiple boxes that are within this larger legend box. So for example, there's another box that is the very top here. Inside of that there is the color scale, and there is a north arrow. So here there's a north arrow and the color scale, and they are both into this color scale box. Then there is a description. So here we have a text box with a description that kind of gives you kind of overview over the different plots that we are seeing, and what the difference is in terms of like how data is presented. So this is a part of a city, and it's basically always the same information that is plotted, or this from the same calculation, but it's plotted in different ways. So we'll go over that in a second. And then after that, we have the different maps. So here, for example, map A. So there is some information that is presented here, and then there's a little text box. And so that is kind of just labeling this map as map A. If I click on this map, I can drag the map and I move it around. Okay. All right. So let me move it back to that position. So this is basically the overlaying parent map is this map here. So this map is basically the outline. You can see the outline here. And so this is kind of where all the other maps are basically incorporated. So we have 6 smaller maps. The legend, they are all part of this overlaying map that is called map. All right. So just a way kind of how that was assembled. Now then we have 2 more texts beside the map, and one is the map title. So that's here at the very top. That's again a text box, and it also has a little shadow to that. and then we have a footer text, which basically defines the path and the name of the sheet. So in case you want to make a printout and you want to remember where that sheet was saved, and then also what version of the software, and yeah, like all that information. So let's get started with like some of these basic text boxes. So let me start with this one that is here at the bottom. I can double click on this text here and I can increase the view. So this is the text. And here we basically have several text variables that are basically assembled. So there's a text called SoundPLAN, and then we have a text variable for the version number, a version date, and then here the version date and the project path and the sheet name. All of those things are part of the text variables that we have up here. So that will be automatically generated as we load this data. Then we have another text box that's here at the very top. Let me open that. So again, with any of these elements, by double clicking that, you can go into the edit. And if you just select it with the left mouse, you can either go to properties or the edit content. So let's get started with the edit content. In this case, just the text of the header right here. Here on the right hand side, we have different formats that we can go over, but at this point I'll skip on that. Then the other thing that we have here is the properties. So for every element in this map, we have properties. And these properties define the layout. So we can turn on, turn off the lines around, in this case, the box. We can create a shadow, and turn it on, turn it off, and define how big of a shadow we have to the right and to the bottom. We can make the background inherit. So if you have a certain color in the back, it automatically inherits it from the back. We can make it transparent, or we can fill the text box with a specific color. So let me make it a little bit a lighter yellow, and I click OK, and here's the change. Then there's other options here where we can save the element. So if this is an element that you want to use in other plots or other sheets, you can save it as a default sheet for example, the header of a map. We can cut and copy, we can delete, and we can also send backwards and send forwards. So this is important when we have multiple layers that are on top of each other. All right, so let's move on. And the next thing I want to go over is that we have these maps. So I'll get started with this map here on the top right. That's map A. So I select that. We can see this is map A and the text. So depending on what you have selected here, you can either use some of the icons here at the very top to either jump into the element properties or into the edit. So this is another way of opening the edit option or the property of that element, right? So in this case, let's open up the property of that element. And then here again, we have the layout, the lines around it, the name. So here in this case, the name is map A. There's certain alignment options that we have, right justified, left justified, or fit in. Fit in basically fixes, the program checks what's available behind it, and it basically expands the size to fit that map within the next bigger parent map. All right. Then here, interesting here also, we can rotate a map or rotate an element by 90 degrees. So that is sometimes of interest when you have a landscape and you want to show it as portrait or vice versa. You can rotate it in 90-degree steps. Then in terms of position, there's 0 and 0. So these are the position relative to the map that we have up here. So this is our map. So this is relative to this map corner, the left top corner. This map A is positioned 0, 0 in basically in X and in Y direction. Then we have the size. So this is the size of the width and the height of the map. So let's keep that in mind. We have 110 and 60. In this case, it's millimeters. All right. Then we have a frame, and this is a frame that we can set up. In this case, there is no frame width defined. If I define a frame width of 3, then we have like a little frame going all around this area. So that's kind of what the frame means. And we can change the frame back to 0. Of course, if you have a frame, you can put additional lines in there, and then also reference markers and other parameters. All right. So maybe one last thing here in terms of the edit content. So edit content defines where is the map relative to the data. So we have here the viewport of this information. So let me open that up. So here the length scale is 1 to 2000. That means if we have a width of this map that is 110, and in this case millimeters, then this is actually representing 220 meters. If this height is 60, then that represents, based on this scale, defines 120 meters. So with this information, you can basically position all these maps, and you have a continuous change from one map to the other. And that's why this assembly that we have here is seamless. So it basically crosses where the buildings are or the roads. It all is kind of seamless. And the reason for that is the width of the maps are exactly positioned so that they overlay. There's no big overlay. They are just butting to each other. All right, so next information I want to go over is for each map, we have a file selection manager. And the file selection manager, as the name says, defines what file information is presented in this map. All right, so open that up. So in this case, we have all the different situations in this project. We can also pick by geofiles. We can pick by the type of information, like grid noise map. So here are all the grid noise maps. And so here we can select from the selection menu. And here on the right-hand side, we see what's already selected for this map. And now all 6 maps that we have here, map A through map F, they are all selecting the same result, result number 1, grid result number 1 for road noise present condition. And they all show the same situation, which is a 0-2 road analysis, which has all the roads of the existing with road traffic and existing buildings and topography and all that information. So that is the same for all the maps. Now, when we select the grid map, if I right click on that, I can see what the scale is that is used. So here is the scale that is currently selected for this specific map. All the maps except of this map here at the bottom left are using the same scaling. So there is one different scale. It's the scale with hatch. So there is one map that is a little bit different. Basically just has colors hatching above 55 and one below 55. So that just gives you an idea of kind of different ways of assigning different color scales to the results or the prediction that you are pulling into the map. Okay. And then up here, we of course we can select which assessment period we want to select. So that's the daytime in this case. All right. So let me click OK and go over how the data is presented in this map. So in this map, if you notice, we have some of the buildings with different color coding. So there's main and auxiliary maybe. And then also what you may notice is that the contour lines, they are not showing up. So we are basically have a solid color between the different contour lines. So the contour lines or scale is up here. So here 65 is the red, 65 to 70, and then the lighter red is 60 to 65. So let's take a look at this map. So let me select that and let's go to map object types. So the map object types again is the basically where we set up and control the presentation of the input and result data on the map. So if I open that up, the program will show me all the parameters and objects other general objects, traffic sources, environmental objects, and of course all the results. In this case, the results only comprises the grid results. So here we have the grid noise map, and again, it's very has a hierarchy in terms of like how it's set up. So we have the grid map, grid noise map results, and then within the grid noise map results, there are several subcategories. So the first one is in the base settings. Do you want to show the grid map? Yes or no? Show or no show? And then here, what's important, it has a draw sequence. So the draw sequence defines as you plot all, or as the graphic plots all the elements in terms of input, in terms of results, in terms of receivers or calculation areas or barriers or roads, in what sequence are these elements in terms of input or results plotted on top of each other. So the draw sequence defines that hierarchy of the plotting on top of each other. And then after that, it's always questioning, do we want to show the contour lines? Do we do any kind of splining in terms of the Bezier algorithm used for the splining? Are we removing any contour areas that are smaller than a certain size? Do we show an edge line at the edge of the map? And then here also, if you have any bitmaps in the background, do we want to the contour map to be transparent over an existing aerial photograph, for example? Then we have, of course, cartography element parameters and then 3D graphic parameters. So here again, we can work with transparencies and all that stuff. So in this case, we have main intervals, and what's interesting here, there is no contour lines showing. So if we turn on the contour lines and apply here, you can see the contour lines are showing up now. So by just clicking and unchecking, the contour lines disappear again. All right. As the contour lines, you can also define a line thickness, the colors of the line, and then also any type of line text that we have. All right. So this is like the first map. So let's, I'll click OK. And let's take a look at the next map. That's this one here, map object types. So here the grid results, the main intervals are showing, but what's important here, we have the grid and the fluid color output. So that is overriding everything. So that's why we see this degrading of the raster values in terms of the coloring of that. Next one I want to look at is number C. So here, let me zoom in. Okay, and let's go to the map object types. And in this case, I actually, before we go in here, File Selection Manager, I also added an aerial photo into the map. So I'll added that, and in terms of the map object types, I changed the color code and color output, and I change it from fill contour areas to not fill contour areas. And I want to show the contour lines, and I want to show them with color scales. So here we can change that. We can make the color thickness a little bit thicker, right? Apply. So the lines get thicker and thicker and thicker. This is actually a nice way of presenting that. What you also may notice here is that these contours also have a dB value attached to them. So this is something that we can turn on, turn off right here. So here the dB values disappear, and then here we turn them on again. Every 100 meters we can show the dB value. Here under the cartography parameters, so this is a cartography feature, we can set up if we want to have any decimal points. In this case I don't like that, so I have it 0. We can put a text before and text after, so we could put in dB, for example, on this text. So here we have 65 dB, 70 dB, and so on and so on. Then we also have a text background, so we can turn on and off that background. Apply. So now it's basically just a black line. And if we want to change that, we can change the font and make it, for example, white. All right. Now, if we wanted to change the filling of the colors here, so we could do that again in the base settings. We can fill the colors, and we could see how that looks. And then here, of course, what is of course now the situation that the grid noise map is completely overshadowing the aerial photo. And then here we can change the transparency, and now we can see through that. Now, one of the things with this here is that the contour lines should be a little bit drawn afterwards. So let's change the contour lines number 6 and the grid contour text maybe number 7. So that is plotted on top of each other. And now the view of this looks much better here. All right. Okay, and let's apply that, click OK. So again, this is another way of presenting the data. Now here, one of the things is different here too, is we also see a contour line of 58 is highlighted with a red line. So that again is part of the map object types. Here we can turn on the limit line, and with the cartography modules, you can actually add multiple limit lines and highlight certain lines that are important in terms of the project. So sometimes it's a 64 or 62 or 72 or whatever specific line, and you can highlight that and either make the line very thick or use a specific color that is very noticeable. All right. So some of the other examples here, of course, here these are contours with individual additional interval lines. So here we have every 1.5 decibel we show a contour line. So the step sizing is 0.5. That's a little bit detailed, so maybe 1 dB. And we can either show the contour lines. So that's kind of what it's doing here. So here it shows the contour lines, or we can also degrade the contours and just don't show the contour lines. So if we fill the contour areas within the scales, and we basically deactivate the output of the contour lines. So then you have the degrading of the contours. Now, one of the things that we see here is the dashed line. The dashed line is the mid-interval. I usually turn that off. And now we see the main lines every 5 dB, and then in between the 1 dB changes in terms of the color coding. Other options here is on the right-hand side here. Again, the scaling is used differently. So let me zoom in here with this magnifying glass. So here it's we are using a different color scale. So let me actually open that up, this color scale, and change the label, and we call it sound level. And so it's basically either a level over 55 or under 55. And in here, what we have is in terms of the description, we are using the hatching right here. So here with hatches and brightness, and that's another way of presenting it. And it's easier to, of course, make black and white copies of plots like that are using the hatches. All right. Now, a couple other things here. All right. And let's go back to the full zoom, total sheet. And then here on the bottom right, that's again a grid results. But then what's interesting or different is that it shows the actual values here. It's also just a very simple check mark here. So here we can show the values as text with the decimal point or no decimal point. And then, of course, there's the font size. So here we can change the font size, make it a little bit smaller. And then here we have the full decibel values plotted for every grid point that was calculated. So let's zoom out again. And maybe last but not least, let's just talk about some of the other elements in the map object types. Map object types. So here, for example, we have these buildings, And so buildings are under the environmental section here, buildings, and there's main buildings. So here we can look up what is the sequence again, and then also what is the color coding. Is it, in this case, it's white. So we could make it, for example, a lighter blue, and then we can turn on or turn off the hatching. And so here now everything is turned off, no hatching. And we could also change the color coding to something else, or here in this case also the outline of the facade. And of course then it just starts looking differently there.